Afternoon, class. As we move towards the finish line, as you look at your syllabus, you'll note that I'm running just out about of things to teach you all as it relates to the textbook directly. With that in mind, over the next couple of weeks, we'll transition where a lot of our class time will be spent more on one-on-one guidance with the final stages of your research. So check your emails and we'll schedule those accordingly. Where during this time, we'll work one-on-one doing towards the completion of your papers. An assignment we have coming up again is the method summary that'll be coming up due over the next couple of weeks. And we talked about experiments last time. We're moving on to our discussion of surveys. And keep in mind that when we talk about surveys, there are many different types of surveys. We'll cover some of those here. Before we get too thick into the material, very briefly, I want to leave up the things that you should know at the end of each chapter. Even though I don't assign MindTap, do yourself some favors by practicing some of those if you could. We do not have a midterm exam. We do have a pop quiz. We've not had it yet, so y'all should know it's coming up soon. So make sure that you're getting up to speed on the reading. And as always, make sure you understand what you should know at the end of each chapter. As we discussed, not every topic is going to be suitable for each method. So there's, again, some topics that are very well suited for survey research. We want to be able to identify the key rules for asking questions in survey questionnaires where it makes it a scientific questionnaire. We want to be able to discuss the advantages and disadvantages of online surveys, provide the mixed mode surveys, provide examples of mixed mode surveys. And again, note what you see in italics, study that closely. Already we've identified several different types of surveys there. And again, you can use all of these your research summary assignment, provided they're relevant to your research question. You want to understand how research projects are most suitable for different types of methods. Every method, experiments, secondary data analysis, case studies, all have their strengths and weaknesses. So you want to be able to identify the strengths and weaknesses of these methods. Make sure you're able to explain secondary analysis and its key advantages and disadvantages. Then finally, be prepared to discuss some ethical problems that might be raised in survey research. So some guidelines for asking questions, and again, a questionnaire specifically. is a document that contains questions and other types of items. And here's the important thing. It's designed to solicit information appropriate for analysis. So a lot of times, people, when they're curious about a topic, they may just want to start asking people questions, that if we want to know about, abusive relationships or something, you might ask people questions, hey, fill out this questionnaire and tell me how many times a week you beat your wife. But you have to be very deliberate and intentional about how you design the questions. Otherwise, you may not get the kind of information that you want. And it's more of an art in many ways than a science. It takes a lot of practice. Oh, shit. But with time and having really clear-cut aims on what you're trying to find out, we talked about before research design and how critical that is. That making sure that your research is set up, in a way that you want it to, and to answer the question that you're looking to answer is really important. Within the questionnaire, there are two types of questions that you can ask. And make sure, again, as always, that you're absorbing information, that you're listening. You're not just writing it down to go over your head. And I'll explain open and closed-end questions a little bit more in a moment. And think back again, the example that, we talked about before. When we were trying to figure out whether or not people, if your boyfriend were cheating on you, how would you try and gather that information? We talked about, you can, do a thirst trap, which would be kind of an experiment, if you will. You could do a direct interview, which we'll talk about later. But whether you could, construct it as a written document or just something that you communicate verbally, how you ask the questions is really important and critical. Open-ended questions are questions for which the respondent is asked to provide his or her own answers. Where a closed-ended question, it gives you a choice of various answers that are chosen by the researcher. Let's look at some examples of each. So this is a closed-ended question. Again, the choices are provided by the researcher. And think about this for again, right? Like, with exams that you take, you could potentially get this question right. And if my goal is to find out how much, individuals taking a survey know about cholesterol, it might not necessarily give me that information accurately because potentially people could guess correctly about these answers. It don't necessarily mean that they know it. It's might like, okay, well, a urine test. I actually don't know the answer to the question myself. But amongst these choices, you can pick it. And if I'm like 80% of people know that high cholesterol, and again, make sure that you're listening to these examples. 80% of people know that high cholesterol is detected by the blood test. Maybe that's true. But a better way to see that might be to ask it this way. How is high cholesterol detected? Y'all see the difference? In this second example, you got to just know it. In this one, you could guess right. Keep this in mind again, like, standardized tests and stuff like that, DRE and stuff that you all have to take. Those open-ended questions are the most difficult. But those are questions you're capable of answering, and those are the most important. Again, like I said, anybody could potentially do this. This don't mean that you necessarily know it. So you have to be very clear about what your goal is in your research. If I'm trying to get the most accurate information as possible, it behooves me to ask the questions in a way to, like, to get that accuracy, because this might not necessarily give me that. The 70% might show more about my survey than people's actual knowledge. So you want to be very mindful about that. And this is why you have to be survey. One of the many reasons why survey research has to sometimes be taken with a grain of salt. It's important, it's useful. And again, we've seen, like, the presidential polling, which, said that Hillary Clinton was going to, like, win the election. And the polls were right, really. She did win the popular vote. She didn't win the election. So again, it's up to you, the researcher, to be really clear about what you're trying to find out. There's some specific guidelines on how to help this. And these are the kind of things you definitely may see on the quiz. You want to make sure that the items are really clear that you're asking. Avoid double barrel questions. Double barrel questions mean, like, that it could potentially be, like, fit into both categories. You want to make sure that all your answers are mutually exclusive, that there's no possibility that two of your choices can confuse folks. You got to make sure that you're a very important aspect of this, and make sure you all are hearing me. You got to make sure that your respondents are competent to answer. Meaning that if you're trying to find out, like, again, if I'm giving this question, to, like, high school students or elementary school students, it might not, again, give me the most accurate information. So I want to make sure that I'm asking this for people that are probably going to know a lot about cholesterol. A very challenging part is the respondents got to be actually willing to answer your questions. And sometimes you all have been offered surveys before here on campus, I'm sure many times. Sometimes people participate, most times they don't. Doesn't mean that people are, insensitive to science or anything. Like, people are busy. You as a researcher got to take that into account and find ways to give them these surveys and information. Because a lot of times also what they may do, Janai, is that, okay, I'll fill out your survey, but let me just do it so I can get it done. And that doesn't help you as a researcher get the information. So you want to make sure that you present the information in a way where people can actually have time to give you some thoughtful answers. Your questions need to be relevant and short. Again, like I said, since people are busy, don't be constructing no 200 question survey that you want people to fill out during lunch. And make sure that your questions are not biased. Like, again, that's a tricky thing to do. But again, with more practice and scrutiny, these things get a lot better. Please make sure that you study, and don't just try and memorize those. Make sure that you really understand some of these guidelines. A lot of these, like, I'm sure that several of you all will go into grad school where you will almost certainly do some level of survey research. So this information can be helpful. Very briefly on the format itself, making sure it's uncluttered. That just means, like, that in the actual print stage of the survey, that you don't have people reading like a whole bunch of text. You want to spread the questions out a little bit. Again, like, so the student evaluation surveys that you all are going to have to do within the next couple of weeks. Making sure that things are spaced out. There should be one question per line. If you having them do it online, it might not be a bad idea on the shot to have them do one question per page. Make sure that the format is consistent, meaning here, Diamond, that the wording in your question needs to be the same. So going back again, high cholesterol is detected by, we're going to do other like, health risks, like it needs to be asthma is detected by, hypertension is detected by. The questions need to be worded the same, like all throughout. As best you can. Again, if you took the sentences again, the questions again, consistent format. And the author goes into detail about why these things are important. Let's look at, again, I give you a lot of examples. So again, like, you want to make sure that the stuff is spaced out. You want to make sure that, Nishaya, you give them clear directions in terms of filling out the survey. If you want them to circle the answer, you need to say that. If you want them just to fill in the oval, you need to say that. Otherwise, it could, people may make marks on the survey and that may compromise your data. And keep in mind, right, that in a perfect world, after you've done all this survey research, your research needs to be transparent and clear. So people need to even be able to see the original surveys. So you want to make sure sometimes, if you see one where it may look like Deja, they marked 2 answers on one, you may have to throw that question out of your data set. There are also contingency questions, and whenever you see something written in italics, make sure that you study that closely. And listen to the word itself, that this question is contingent upon, and I'll elaborate on that more in a moment. So this basically Diamond, it's a question intended only by only some respondents, that even if you may give the survey to 100 people, but not every person will answer these contingency questions. I'll give an example and then double back with the definition again. I'll let y'all get this down. So for example, a contingency question, and please make sure that you check this out within the text. I think it can really help break this stuff down for you. So have you ever smoked marijuana? If your answer is no, which I'm sure all of y'all answers would be in this simple question, of course, you would just go on to the next question. But if your answer is yes, Deja, then they want you to give more specifics. And in this way, right, again, if you're trying to get information on people who use marijuana, and again, make sure you're hearing me, the logic of why we do these things, that if you just say that 70% of people use marijuana, that could be instructive. But if most of those people have only used it one time, you might be making your data set look like they're a bunch of weed heads out here. Deja might have tried it one time in high school at a party, and that was it. That's very different from Janiyah 20 times or more this week. I'm just kidding. But you see what I'm saying, right? Again, that getting that level of specificity is different. That people that use 20 times or more oftentimes may be different in your data than people that just used it once. So contingency question will let you get to that in a way that just asking people yes or no questions would not. Y'all hear me? Because sometimes, again, again, the example we gave in the beginning, if you want to find out if your boyfriend's cheating on you, have you been cheating on me? Yes or no? No. That's the end of the discussion. Same thing again with any type of thing we're trying to find out. And a lot of times, Latasia, yes and no answers just won't be satisfactory for what we're trying to learn. Again, other contingency questions. Have you ever been abducted by aliens? Show of hands in the class. Anybody ever been abducted before? Anybody? Okay, good. So you all will go on to the next question. But if you did, Nishaya, you would have to answer some, they would want you to answer some contingency questions. Okay, cool. You were abducted by aliens. Did they let you steer the ship? How fast did you go? Again, you get to get more information in detail depending upon what you want to learn. Sometimes, again, you'll construct a survey where you may have to skip some questions. Most of y'all probably haven't had to do taxes yet, but a lot of the tax paperwork is like that. Do you have any dependent children? Yes or no? If no, go on to question 27. There are also matrix style questions, and again, make note of this in italics. And please, again, I know I'm going through some of this pretty quickly. So please, avail yourself to the recorded lecture and go back and check some of this stuff out later on. And even if you have read it already, which I hope you have, I'll go back and review some of the material as well. Yeah, it will hopefully make more sense. But most of these things you all have seen before. Like I said, you've taken surveys. Some of you all have probably given some surveys. And the big thing with the matrix, Latasia, is that the category of answers are the same. The answers are going to be the same throughout. Strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree, undecided. So every question, there may be 20 questions like this. And those are your choices all throughout. And again, as we go through this, like I would encourage you to think about, your own research. Again, what's the method that you all are going to, the primary method that you all are going to use for your research in this class? What's the primary method you all are going to use?
Secondary data analysis.
Excellent. So even though you probably won't use surveys at this stage, a lot of the authors that you're going to look at in your annotated bibliography and the like will use surveys. So it'll be helpful for you to kind of like understand some of the things that you're reading in the abstracts, and make note you only need to look at the abstracts. And when we start meeting over the next couple of weeks, that's what we're one of the things we're really going to dig into. You start to get some sources, you start to get some abstracts. So what I'm going to help you do, Latasia, is to go into those abstracts and pull out the information that's useful for your paper. But if you only got 5 abstracts when we start meeting next week, then my help won't be as beneficial. So make sure you start to get as many sources as you possibly can. Even though in most cases I'm asking for 20, I encourage you to get like 25 or 30, because some of those you may end up may find are not as useful. And our helpful library staff will be more than happy to assist you with that. Again, the construction of the questionnaire itself is also going to be important. The appearance. Do you put your open or closed-ended questions first? Do you randomize the order? Demographic questions should generally go at the end. And demographic questions include: are you male or female? What's your race? What's your Janai? What's your income level? What's your education level? And in that way, we want to find out, like, okay, using the cholesterol example, do women know more about cholesterol, how to measure cholesterol than men? They probably do. Does income level affect your knowledge of cholesterol levels, or how to measure cholesterol? Probably does. So we want to be able to speak to things like that. What the surveys are trying to do, again, like I talked about before, the more common ones were presidential surveys or the student evaluation surveys. What we're trying to do here is to see if any patterns occur. Do women view a certain issue a certain way? Do Black people view issue a certain way? Does this state view this particular issue differently than this state over here? In your survey, you need to have some clear comments and instructions. And again, in your text, they give you a lot of good examples of these that you can follow and adopt. And generally, Latasia, you want to pre-test a questionnaire where before you start to give it out to your respondents, you might want to test it out where if you're trying to find out if Diamond, if you want to like find out some differences between female-headed single parent households and male-headed single parent households, before you start giving it to them, and you might want to give it to like 100 of each, and just try and find out if any patterns emerge between the things that male single parent households are doing and female single parent households are doing. But in that, and make sure y'all hear me on this, in asking those questions, Diamond, you got to construct your questionnaire in a way where they don't know that you're trying to figure out. Why do y'all think that is? That you can't let them know that what you're interested in is their gender. Why? Don't worry about if you get it wrong or not. But why do you think that we need to be very clear and not and try and obscure the information that we're trying to get from the survey from the respondents? Why? It's kind of similar to like what we talked about with the Hawthorne effect. Does anybody recall what the Hawthorne effect was?
Can you hear me?
Now I can.
Okay, cool.
You said the Hawthorne effect?
Yes. And that was related to experiments specifically where they were hoping that the lights would affect the change in behavior, but instead it was the researchers that affected the change in behavior. So the same thing with surveys where if people have a sense of what you're trying to find out, they'll give you that information. So if I think that I'm being evaluated as a male single parent, I might answer questions in a way that makes instead of being fully honest, I may answer questions in such a way that makes me look like a really effective male single parent. A major source that you all will use, particularly when you go to grad school, is the General Social Science Survey, where all types of information and data, like I would highly recommend, like I would imagine we probably have access to this in our library system. I would highly recommend some of you all check this out because almost every question you can imagine has been asked in the General Social Science Survey. I think they do it like every 5, maybe 10 years. And it's just a survey of the general American population. Like I said, almost any topic you can imagine. Some sample questions here that you can see in 9.6 in your textbook. And the questionnaires themselves can be like distributed in a couple of ways. You can have self-administered questionnaires. Again, your student evaluation surveys will be this way, where you fill it out yourself. The census. We give you this survey. You take it out at your, you fill it out at your leisure. But again, this could, get dangerous, like, because, you have to take into account a lot of people, particularly if you mail your surveys to people. Most people aren't going to return that stuff. It's going to end up as junk mail. So you want to create some systems to monitor your returns and maybe do some follow-up mailings. After the second or third wave, you may get a few more people, but you need to always take into account that unless you can ask them the questions, unless you can have all the people right there answering your questions in real time, it can be hard to get some of this data. An ideal response rate, like if you send out 100 surveys, if you get 70 responses, that would be ideal. Again, that's not the norm. We talked about, before, like one of the reasons why there's so much in the social sciences, one of the reasons why so much research is done on college students is that we got access to y'all. It can force y'all to sit there and answer the questions in a way that is difficult for the rest of the human population. But as we talked about before, that can be challenging because a lot of times conclusions are made about, a very unique population that is different from the rest of America. But the response rate just simply refers to the number of people participating in the survey divided by the number selected in the sample. That again, in doing surveys, you should go in, Latasia, with a sense in your head, not a sense, a precise number in your head of how many you want to get. I want to survey 100 people, 200 people, 300. On average, 100 will, if the survey is constructed properly, 100 will give you a pretty good sense of things. But it all depends upon the construction of your sample. If you only give this survey to 100 of your friends, it's probably going to be pretty biased. You can also do an interview. Again, as opposed to giving them a hand-administered survey, you can, again, and in my research, I did a little bit of both. So as I talked about before, I started off doing participant observation where I would literally go to clubs and I would observe people's interactions with hip hop culture and music. Over time, there would be some people that I thought would be worthy of interviewing so I could get more information on this topic. So I would approach them with the interview, and then we would do an interview. It would be recorded, usually at least 2 to 3 hour sessions. And in this way, right? So we talked about before, right? Contingency questions. Have you ever been abducted by aliens? Again, on the survey, a lot of times you may have this question, but you may not have a chance to ask follow-up questions. A really good benefit of the interview is you can ask a follow-up question. And if you ask somebody a question right there and then the information I might want to get from the Shia might be different from what I want to learn from Latasia. Interviews have a much higher response rate. People will be more willing to sit down and talk to you than fill out some paperwork. As we talked about, yes and no, I don't know. That don't really tell us a whole bunch of stuff. So interviews can help you get past those. But again, you got to be really skilled at asking the right questions. One of the things we talk about in social psychology is how important body language is to our communication. If somebody's filling out a survey, they might not be able to communicate that. But if you ask a question and you see that they ask a question they're kind of lively and energetic, and then their head kind of drops. That will give you information that will allow you to pursue more fact-based information relevant to your topic more deeply than you could with the survey. The bad thing about it though with the interview, like I said, my sessions, it will take 2 to 3 hours. A real benefit of surveys, Nashai, is that they're very quick and efficient. You can get your data very quickly. But the data you get might not be as detailed and deep. For a survey, you want to dress appropriately. And appropriately does not mean that you have to necessarily dress formally. It needs to be appropriate for your social setting. Like I said, when I'm doing the interviews of hip hop, I wasn't coming dressed in a shirt and tie most of the time. You want to be very familiar with your questionnaire, Janiyah, meaning that as opposed to okay, you're just reading every single question, you really got to know, you ideally have been the person that's created this questionnaire. And that's almost always going to take several months. It's going to take some editing and re-editing, wording and rewording. So by the time that you get to sit down with this person, you really want to have a strong command of the questions themselves. You got to follow the question wording exactly. Again, we talked about this, whether it be your research question, your hypothesis, the precise wording is really important. Changing a couple of words can change the things that you're looking to find out. You got to record the responses exactly as they said. Not what you think they meant, not what they implied. You got to write down exactly what's said. And then again, probe where necessary. This just means that you know that, okay, so tell me if you were abused as a child. Yes. Is that satisfactory? Or do you probably want to know a little bit more about that topic? You probably want to know more. But you got to ask it in a way, Nashai, where, you ain't going to traumatize a person either. So again, there may be times where it's like, okay, let me pull a little bit more to get a little bit more information. There may be other times you're not like, okay, look, let's stop for now, and we'll do some more interviews next week. So understanding that balance, so again, you can get the information you're looking for. A couple more points. We're gonna get shut out in a moment, but I'll have us all log back in. It is 1:35 to my clock. We're gonna log back in at 1:50 sharp. We'll log back in at 1:50 sharp. And again, the final thing, like I say, that particularly when you all go to grad school, you're going to get a lot of training on how to do these things. These like you all are going to be specialists. These are people's jobs to try and get information like this. That if we talked about before, the HIV rate is pretty high in Black communities, is very high in Columbia, South Carolina. And as some future social workers, you all may have to collect data on that to get those numbers down. And getting that data might mean that you have to go interview people within some of these communities to kind of find out what are the sexual practices and behaviors, what's their access to healthcare and things like that. So you have to get well trained on how to get this information. It's really, really important because, a lot of the health disparities that we see a lot of times with Black people, it's just that we don't have as much data and information as we could. And a lot of that, quite frankly, your average white person, they're not going to be going into the hood, man, to get this information. We got to go. But we got to be well trained to be able to do so. Are there any questions or comments about anything we've learned so far? What time are we logging back in?
1:50.
Say it one more again.
1:50.
I'll see you all at that time.